The world's gaze is fixed on the Caribbean, not for its turquoise waters and sun-drenched beaches, but for a brewing geopolitical storm centered on Venezuela, a nation now at the heart of a global power struggle. Venezuela, a country blessed with vast oil reserves yet battered by years of economic and political crisis, has made a bold move by joining the BRICS bloc, an alliance of emerging powers now openly challenging the Western-led world order and seeking to reshape global influence. This dramatic shift, announced in September 2025, has jolted Washington and turned the Caribbean into a contested arena, raising alarms in the halls of power across the United States. Years of shifting alliances, covert deals, and foreign influence have led to this pivotal moment where old certainties are being upended. The Monroe Doctrine, once the cornerstone of U.S. policy to keep outside powers at bay in the Americas, has been steadily eroded as China and Russia have gained ground in Latin America, offering investment, technology, and military support that the U.S. has often withheld. Venezuela's entry into BRICS cements deeper economic and military ties with Beijing and Moscow, right on America's doorstep, bringing new players into a region long dominated by U.S. interests. The Caribbean is not just a scenic paradise, it is a vital artery for U.S. trade and energy supplies, with shipping lanes that connect the Americas to the world. Now, a foreign-backed military presence in Venezuela is seen as a direct security threat, raising the specter of confrontation and military escalation. This is no longer just about Venezuela's internal politics, it's a test of American power and influence in a rapidly shifting multipolar world. For Maduro's government, long isolated by U.S. sanctions and diplomatic pressure, BRICS offers a lifeline, access to new markets, financial support, and powerful new allies. Caracas now claims victory for its sovereignty, backed by 2 nuclear-armed Security Council members, and presents itself as a symbol of resistance against Western dominance. The confidence in Venezuela is palpable. The government frames this as a historic defeat for Yankee imperialism, rallying its supporters and reshaping its national narrative. The U.S. must now urgently reconsider its regional defense strategy, as the Caribbean becomes a new front in the intensifying global competition for power and influence. The stakes have never been higher for both sides, with military planners and diplomats racing to adapt to the new reality. The stage is set for a high-stakes confrontation, with the Caribbean now transformed into the world's newest chessboard of global power, a place where the next moves could shape the future of international relations. The U.S. has responded to Venezuela's BRICS move with Operation Sea Shield, deploying a powerful naval task force to the Caribbean. Officially, it's a counter-narcotics mission, but the scale, aircraft carriers, destroyers, signals a broader intent. This is a de facto blockade, a show of force meant to intimidate Caracas and warn China and Russia. The operation creates a quarantine zone around Venezuela, using law enforcement as a legal pretext. Washington presents itself as a defender of stability, but the real aim is to pressure Maduro and deter foreign militaries. The Trump administration's strategy, Project Strength, act unpredictably, and force adversaries to reconsider. The U.S. Navy's presence draws a clear line. Any foreign warship crossing it risks confrontation. It's a high-risk gamble. Success could reassert U.S. dominance, failure could spark direct conflict with nuclear powers. The world hasn't seen such a tense standoff in the Caribbean for decades. The U.S. is betting on intimidation to halt Venezuela's new alliances, but the risk of escalation is real and immediate. The region is now a flashpoint, with global consequences. The next move could change the balance of power in the hemisphere. China and Russia wasted no time countering the U.S. move, swiftly orchestrating a strategic response. Both nations dispatched advanced naval forces to the Caribbean, joining Venezuela for joint maritime drills, showcasing a formidable alliance. This is unprecedented, no longer symbolic port visits, but a direct challenge to U.S. power in its own backyard, a bold statement of intent. Venezuela is now under the protection of 2 global powers, fundamentally shifting the region's balance and altering geopolitical dynamics. For Russia, it's payback for NATO's moves in Eastern Europe, a strategic counterbalance to Western influence. For China, it's about securing vital oil resources and expanding strategic influence in a region traditionally dominated by the U.S. The joint drills are a bold signal. China and Russia are united against U.S. unilateralism, showcasing their military prowess. Their warships demonstrate not just intent, but capability to contest U.S. dominance, a clear message of defiance. The Caribbean is no longer an uncontested American lake, it has become a theater of strategic competition. The presence of these fleets marks a new era of great power rivalry in the Western Hemisphere, reshaping global power dynamics. Beijing and Moscow are betting that the US will hesitate to escalate, testing the limits of American resolve. The world is watching as the chess pieces move into place, with each move scrutinized by global powers. The stakes are high: energy security, regional influence, and the credibility of global alliances hang in the balance. The US faces a direct challenge to its traditional sphere of influence, a test of its strategic dominance. The crisis is now global, with the Caribbean as its epicenter, drawing international attention and concern. The next confrontation could redefine the rules of engagement between superpowers, setting a new precedent for global conflict. As warships gather in tense formation, a parallel and equally fierce battle rages, not on the seas, but in the global media landscape. The United States frames Operation Sea Shield as a determined fight against drug trafficking, drawing a direct line between Venezuela and America's devastating overdose crisis. This narrative is carefully crafted to justify military presence and rally public support at home. By positioning itself as a regional protector, the US appeals not only to its allies but also to domestic audiences, reinforcing its image as a force for stability and security in the hemisphere. Meanwhile, Venezuela, China, and Russia counter with their own powerful messaging, claiming anti-imperialist solidarity and denouncing what they see as US overreach. Caracas and its allies loudly call the US operation illegal aggression, warning that it could be a prelude to a full-scale invasion and a violation of international law. At the United Nations, Moscow and Beijing accuse Washington of violating Venezuela's sovereignty and practicing gunboat diplomacy, urging the world to resist unilateral actions. They present their own naval presence as a purely defensive measure, upholding the principles of multipolarity and international cooperation. The framing war is crucial. How the crisis is portrayed could sway neutral nations, influence public opinion worldwide, and ultimately shape the outcome of the standoff. The US seeks to build a broad coalition or at the very least, silence its critics, keeping diplomatic options open for both escalation and de-escalation as the situation evolves. China and Russia meanwhile appeal to the global south, invoking memories of past Western interventionism and positioning themselves as champions of sovereignty and self-determination. Both sides fiercely vie for the moral high ground, framing the crisis as a battle between law enforcement and sovereignty, unilateralism and multipolarity, each seeking to win hearts and minds. The narrative that prevails may ultimately determine which side gains international legitimacy and support, shaping alliances for years to come. In this crisis, perception is as powerful as military might. Images and words can tip the balance as much as ships and soldiers. The world is being asked to choose sides, not just in the Caribbean, but in the very future of the global order, as the struggle for influence and legitimacy plays out on the world stage. The crisis has fractured Latin America, forcing nations to pick sides or walk a diplomatic tightrope. Colombia and Brazil back the US, wary of Venezuela's instability but stop short of endorsing intervention. Cuba, Nicaragua, and Bolivia condemn the US and praise China and Russia, seeing Maduro's defiance as inspiration. Most countries like Argentina, Mexico, and Chile urge de-escalation, opposing both Maduro's regime and foreign intervention. The Organization of American States is sidelined, unable to forge consensus. As fleets gather, neutrality is becoming impossible. Every nation must choose, or risk being swept up in the storm. Analysts see echoes of the Cuban Missile Crisis, great powers clashing in America's backyard, but now with three players. The risk of miscalculation is high rival fleets, no deconfliction protocols, and the potential for a minor incident to spiral. China and Russia are no longer junior partners. They're prepared for a prolonged standoff and won't back down easily. Even a peaceful resolution sets a new precedent. The US must now compete for influence at home. The Caribbean is a permanent front line in the new great power rivalry. The world holds its breath, hoping history won't repeat itself. The crisis is a political gamble for Trump, playing to his base with a show of strength. Florida's Cuban and Venezuelan American voters cheer the tough stance, but critics warn of reckless escalation. Opponents fear a humanitarian disaster and another endless conflict, while economic risks, like spiking oil prices, loom large. The administration walks a fine line, appear tough, but avoid economic blowback. A quick victory would be a political win. A drawn-out standoff or casualties could be disastrous. Trump's political fate is tied to the outcome, with the world watching. The stakes are as high at home as they are abroad. For Maduro, this is an existential fight. Years of crisis and U.S. sanctions left his regime isolated. BRICS and military backing from China and Russia are his boldest moves yet. The arrival of foreign warships deters U.S. intervention and elevates Venezuela's status. BRICS membership offers diplomatic legitimacy and economic lifelines, bypassing U.S. sanctions. But the risks are immense. Venezuela is now a proxy battleground, its fate tied to decisions in Beijing and Moscow. If their support falters, Maduro's position could collapse overnight. He's called America's bluff, but at the cost of his nation's independence. Venezuela's future now hangs on the resolve of its new allies.